Thank you for tuning in to Entertain the Geeky, your source for nerd news.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Jason back at you with more nerd news. So it seems like every week I do this, there just gets to be more and more stuff to talk about, more and more exciting stories that are popping up. So we're gonna go over some of the things that were making headlines in the nerd world this week. So the big one this week marked the release of Black Panther, and it was fantastic. I mean, if you haven't seen it, I highly, highly, highly recommend it because not only does it do so much for movies in general, it's probably the best MCU movie to date. And for me, up until this point, the best movie that they had done was Captain America: Winter Soldier. And I've talked about this before. Honestly, coming up tomorrow, we'll have a review of Black Panther. Myself and Joe's going to stop by, and we're going to get this review done. So we'll talk about it a little more in depth there, but it's the top. I mean, for me, there's nothing above it now, because it really just does so much to build its story. And it doesn't waste a lot of its own plot time trying to build the larger MCU narrative, which is something that we've not seen in an MCU movie maybe ever. I don't know. I mean, think back if you can think of any that that have really just served their own narrative and not done anything to build the bigger narrative. Let me know. Send me an email at etgnerdnews@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to anybody out there about this. But it's a fantastic movie, and it's definitely worth a look in the theaters. So like I said, stay tuned. Tomorrow we'll have a spoiler review up, and then later this week I'm putting up a blog post, a spoiler-free review of Black Panther, which is just kind of my opinions about what I thought about the film and what it does for film in general. And I hope that we start to see more movies like this because it's just a fantastic film, start to finish, beautifully acted, and it's a bright new corner of the MCU universe that we have not seen yet. So in other movie news, some rumors were denied this week about New Mutants. New Mutants is the horror-style movie set in the XMen universe from 20th Century Fox. It was originally supposed to release this year in April, but got pushed back to February of next year. And the rumors have been flying about what that could mean. Some things popped up about reshoots happening. I've even heard people talk about the fact that they might be trying to connect this into the larger MCU world, since 20th Century Fox is going to be acquired by Disney in the interim time here in this year of 2018. So a lot of interesting rumors have popped up that the movie just wasn't testing well. But Maisie Williams, who is playing Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair in the movie, has come forward and said that all your rumors are wrong. She hasn't been doing any reshoots. She's done some ADR stuff in the studio, kind of dubbing and doing some voiceover work for some of the bigger moments for her character, and probably some of the CG moments for her character where she will be a wolf creature. How much they do that transformation, whether it's just she's kind of classic Wolfman style where she just gets kind of hairy and feral looking, or if they do an entire CG monster thing, which is typically the way they go in the comic universe. So I'd be surprised to see them not go that route with this movie. But she says there are no reshoots. The movie is finished. She hasn't worked on it in months and months and months, and every now and again she's been seeing new snippets of information, new pieces of footage for her ADR stuff, things that are put together that she didn't get to see. And she's very excited. She says this movie's going to be great. It's really going to change how we look at X-Men movies and movies with mutants in general. So honestly, what those reshoots are or what is happening because of the delay is not really confirmed, but we do definitely know that it has nothing to do with reshoots. The movie is finished. The movie is fine. And in all reality, it probably has more to do with the sale of 20th Century Fox than we think. It probably has more to do with the fact that they don't want to distract from Deadpool, which is going to be their huge release this year. And we will probably see, reports are saying X-Men Dark Phoenix is supposed to hit screens this year. We don't have a firm release date for that. as of yet, but I would imagine it's probably sometime in the later months of the year, maybe late summer, the fall, sometime in there. But I'm actually really looking forward to this one. I mean, if you remember back to the trailer, it has a horror movie feel, which is something new that we've not seen. I guess something that has not really been explored in the superhero movie genre at all. It's been interesting to see how those elements blend together and what this does, if anything, to connect to other 20th Century Fox Marvel films. Deadpool 2, while it kind of pokes fun at the other films, and while it definitely has some X-Men characters in it, it feels very standalone. But they are building to something bigger with X-Force and Cable. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. So moving on into comic news, I've talked about it a few times on the show. Brian Michael Bendis has moved from Marvel to DC. He signed an exclusive contract with DC, and he's going to be writing some Superman stuff and possibly some other things that have yet to be announced in the future. But apparently Marvel tried like heck to get him to stay on board. He's one of the big prolific writers within their company. He's one of the architects and has been one of the architects for a while. And what that means, if you're unfamiliar, is the architects of Marvel are just kind of a committee of writers and executives that kind of decide where the comics will go, what kind of stories will be told, what characters will have focus put on them, and what the big events are going to be. And Bendis has been responsible for some big, huge stories from Marvel. He's written Daredevil. He spent a long time writing Avengers, New Avengers. Heck, who the New Avengers became within their lineup was due to Bendis' writing in the post-Avengers Disassembled world, where we had a New Avengers team that was led by Luke Cage and included characters like Wolverine, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, Thing. So he, and in addition to that, then after writing Avengers for a long time, they gave him reins of the X-Men universe. He introduced us to, all new X-Men, where we brought the original 5 X-Men out of their timeline into present day time. And that was a very interesting, thing that is still impacting the comics even today. So he is an architect. He has been responsible for some of the biggest Marvel comic stories to date, and he's definitely been one in the modern era here, as I've been reading, that I've been following with great interest. I mean, I've never been a big Avengers comic fan, but when Bendis was writing Avengers, man, I bought every issue. He's a fantastic writer, and I'm in all reality, Marvel tried very hard to get him to stay on board. They offered him some things that he hadn't done yet. Apparently, quoted from him, they offered him Wolverine, the solo Wolverine comic series, and the chance to write a solo Deadpool comic series, which from his own admission are two things he wishes he could have gotten, kind of dipped his hands into. But apparently sitting down with Dan DiDio and the people at DC Comics, they just made him a better offer. They gave him the chance to do some things in his career that he hasn't had a chance to yet. And this doesn't mark the first time that Bendis has written for DC in general. Bendis wrote for DC before he wrote for Marvel. So kind of getting him back, I think they offered him some things that maybe while he was at DC he really wanted to do and didn't get a chance to do. We know that he's going to be one of the many writers listed for the Action Comics 1000, which is going to be a big quadruple-sized book that's going to bring back some writers who've written Superman in the past and give them a chance to kind of tell a little piece of the story. And Bendis' name is definitely attached to that. And whether or not that leads to him writing Action Comics or even taking over Superman is yet to be seen. But I assume we will probably get more information about what Bendis will be doing for DC Comics out of Comics Pro next week, which is a convention, a retailer convention for comic shop retailer management and representatives of these various comic shops to sit down and listen to publishers who have conferences the whole weekend talking about the upcoming projects and the things that they have coming down the pipeline. And actually, next week we are going to have Scott Sampson on the show, who is going to be out at that convention, and he's going to come on the show and he's going to talk to us about all those cool things that the comic companies are teasing for the future. And obviously, there'll be some stuff that he can't talk about, but there will definitely be things that he will be able to. And we're excited to bring that to you here with Entertain the Geeky and Nerd News. So another thing that's going on within Marvel, it's something that was set up a long, long time ago, and it's kind of been on again, off again. But apparently, Colossus and Kitty Pryde are going to get married. And say what you will about that. It's been a romance, a tumultuous romance throughout the years. It's kind of been on again. It's kind of been off again. And ultimately, think what you will about comic characters getting married and it kind of seeming a little maybe forced or gimmicky. But this is the romance and the love between Colossus and Kitty Pryde is something that has been budding and building since Chris Claremont introduced us to Kitty Pryde during the Dark Phoenix saga. And ironically enough, they are bringing Chris Claremont back to write the wedding special one-shot. So there's a story that's going to be going on in the pages of XMen Gold. 26 through 30 is bringing us a storyline called Till Death Do Us Part. And apparently that's supposed to be where all this is kind of being finalized. And then the wedding special is a one-shot that will be the actual wedding of Colossus and Kitty Pryde. And if you've read X-Men comic books where characters have gotten married, like Jean and Scott, there is always some kind of villain or some kind of plot trying to destroy this perfect day. So I imagine that's what the wedding special will be. But interestingly enough, like I said, Chris Claremont is getting to come back and write it, and I think this is fantastic because he's the one who kind of set this all in motion long ago. So there's definitely, if you're going to find one person who should be at the helm of this event, it's the guy who set it all in motion. And I think, while I'm not as big a fan of Chris Claremont today as I was back then, and in all reality, I think the man's a little overrated. Because while he's given us some great X-Men stories, most of his X-Men stuff is just okay. I mean, everybody remembers the big ones like Days of Future Past and Dark Phoenix Saga. And while Dark Phoenix Saga was a huge impact, had huge long-term implications on the X-Men universe, we have to remember Days of Future Past was like 2 issues of his book. It became this huge thing because of what it did and because of its future characters coming back and influencing the characters in the past and trying to change their future. It was interesting, but it wasn't it didn't have a very big impact at the time. It kind of developed its following later. And I think that's probably the same with Dark Phoenix Saga. I mean, I wasn't reading comics or even alive, or maybe I was very, very young when Dark Phoenix Saga was being written, but it's a story that, yes, it has a huge impact now, but I wonder, did it have a huge impact then? And if I've got some fans that remember reading that book when it hit the shelves, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at etgnerdnews@gmail.com, because I'd love to hear if this comic had an impact on the industry at the time, or if it really came down to, years later it develops this following because the Phoenix was such an important part of many, many X-Men stories over the years. So, kind of coming back to the topic, though, Chris Claremont getting to write this wedding of Kitty and Colossus, I think, is really going to be interesting. And I'm not, I do think sometimes these things feel gimmicky, but I do think this is something they've been setting up for a long time. And it's finally coming to fruition. And I think it's a good thing. We'll see some interesting storytelling possibilities that come out of it. And X-Men Gold has been a fantastic book. The X-Men books have been really fantastic lately. X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold. We had the first issue of X-Men Red last week, and it was good. I mean, they seem like they're trying to reinvigorate these characters and bring them to an audience that really hasn't had a lot of good stories in a long time to enjoy from the X-Men world. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Moving on over into the video game side of things. So I personally have not played Dragonball FighterZ or FighterZ or FighterZ or whatever it's called, but I've heard great things. I've seen the gameplay footage. It is a game that I will be picking up just as soon as I can because I love Dragon Ball Z, and I would love to play what they're calling the best representation of Dragon Ball Z in a fighting game that's ever been made. And that's a huge statement, because if you're like me and you played Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi, these were fantastic games, and they were pretty simplistic in their nature, but they were still fun if you were a fan of the source material. Kind of hardcore fighting game fans may not have enjoyed them because of the over-the-top nature and the kind of simplistic button combos. But if you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z, it didn't get better than Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi. They were fantastic games. But one thing that has popped up this week is a couple of DLC fighter characters that are going to be added to the game in the coming months have popped up. There are already 24 characters in the game to select right off the bat, so all the classics are there. I mean, you got Goku, you got Vegeta, you got the Ginyu Force, you've got Krillin and Yamcha and Cell and all the forms of Buu. So Goten, Gohan, Trunks, all of the characters, the androids, everybody that you can think of. But a few are missing, and they are obviously going to be released as DLC characters. And the first two have been announced as Brody, the legendary Super Saiyan, which he's a pretty. I mean, in the anime story, he's always kind of a broken character. He was a Super Saiyan god. So it'd be interesting to see how his character is balanced within the game. And the other one is Goku's father, Bardock, which is an interesting addition to do right away. I mean, that's a character that even hardcore fans might not have but a passing familiarity with. So just interesting choices on their part. And I'll give you more information about this as it happens, but I'm definitely planning on picking up DB FighterZ in the future and giving it a try. I'll let you all know what I think of it. In other video game news, apparently the success of the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy has caused Sony to look at one of their other properties for the possibility of the same type of remastering. So Spyro the Dragon is getting his remaster apparently this year. And the game, similar to the Insane Trilogy, will feature the first 3 games from the Spyro series. So Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, and Spyro Year of the Dragon. So they're promising us the same thing they've delivered on with the Insane Trilogy from Crash Bandicoot. So this isn't just a re-release of the games. This is an entire remaster. And I don't want to say from the ground up, because the Insane Trilogy, while its visuals are beautiful, its gameplay still is pretty much the same. How you move through the environments, the boss battles, these kinds of things haven't really changed much or been overhauled at all. But it's the nostalgia factor, right? The companies are taking advantage of our love of these old things. And I've talked about this on the show before, and I won't go into it again because I feel like my position is clear. But the Spyro games were really enjoyable. PlayStation 1 era games, similar to Crash Bandicoot. They weren't as in-depth as some of the other games that were being released at the time, and definitely not as in-depth as some of the games being released today. But they had their place. They were interesting little platforming games. And Spyro was so above what Crash Bandicoot brought to the table, kind of the comedy stylings of him as a character. Whereas Spyro was just adorable. Spyro was this little dragon living in this world who was trying to fight evil, and he was just an adorable little character, and you loved his story because it was so heartwarming and full of love. And I just really, honestly, I didn't pick up the Insane Trilogy. I mean, I've watched playthroughs, and I've even tried it at a friend's house. But the Spyro remasters I might pick up, I guess, depending on the price tag. Because those are 3 games that I would not mind revisiting. They were very, very fun. And it's been they're PlayStation 1 era games, so it's been years and years and years since I've had my hands on them. So it might be an interesting thing to kind of go back and rehash a little bit of. So moving on over into the TV universe, this is something that, so Riverdale, if you're a fan of Riverdale, I mean no offense by this statement, but I just think Riverdale is not a good representation of Archie. And it's trying to be a teen drama, and I get that, right? You're trying to modernize the characters, but you lose some of what the fun is, and I've never been a fan of Archie comics as a comic story either, really, so the whole thing just really doesn't appeal to me. But one thing that is happening, spinning out of Riverdale, is the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And if you're unfamiliar, it is a very dark horror comic set in the world of Archie comics, and it's witchcraft and zombies, and it's just got a great horror feel. And some news came out this week that because when I first heard they were going to do this, I thought to myself that might be something I want to check out. But then when I thought it's going to be set in the Riverdale world, and I'm just really not a fan of what that show has done. But apparently some news has come out today that Netflix doing Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is going to make it a separate universe from the Archie Riverdale world. So that could be very interesting. Honestly, what I don't like about Riverdale is it's the fact that it's on the CW, and it kind of has to fall into the stylings that a lot of their shows do with the teen drama or the relationship drama. And that's fine if that's what you're into. That's not really what I'm into. But seeing Sabrina done without network censorship, with the Netflix kind of more adult take on the source material, I think could be very interesting, because it is as its namesake implies, it is a very chilling tale. So here's hoping, right? I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that this is going to be something that kind of challenges what the comic used to be, and shows us a good kind of solid take on this horror world that Sabrina inhabits. So keep your eyes out for that. Should be coming to your screens, your Netflix queue later this fall. But that's going to wrap it up for me. Again, there's so much other stuff that happened this week. And if I didn't talk about the thing you wanted to hear about, let me know. Shoot me an email if you want to hear more about this thing or that thing. I'm always open to suggestions, and I love to hear feedback from the listeners, from you guys out there who are enjoying what we're doing here. And if you are enjoying what we're doing here, do me a favor and head on over to entertainthegeeky.com. We've got the site all overhauled. We've got the blog posts. We've got the nerd news blurbs. We've got all the shows stuff there, from Roger and Chris's podcast to mine. Everything's right there on the main page. You can find it all very quickly. We've got the merchandise up. You can get our official Entertain the Geeky and Nerd News t-shirts. We've got coffee mugs and cell phone cases and anything you can think of that you can put our goofy little cartoon avatar faces on, and show your support for the show. If you're looking for more of a fix, check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/entertainmentgeeky. If that's more your speed, you want to use the Facebook more than you do just regular websites. We also have the Twitter feed at Entertain Geeky. We've got all kinds of stuff going up every week, new content on the site. So do me a favor and check that out. And that's gonna be the end for me. Thanks for listening. And if you dig what we're putting down, like I said, reach out to me at etgnerdnews@gmail.com. Until next week, guys, stay geeky.